Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where we talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and/or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm talking about the latest episode of the originals, the latest episode of Colony, as well as the latest episode of Reverie. Like always, if I'm talking about something you want to listen to, you can always look in the description down below. I include a time when I start talking about each of the respective shows. So, for example, if you want to hear what I say about the latest episode of the originals, you can skip to what I say about this week's episode of Colony, and/or skip to what I say about this week's episode of Reverie. But the first thing I'm going to talk about is this week's episode of the originals. A great episode. Obviously, the situation with Hope, we kind of get to see it firsthand. And the sad thing is with Hope's situation is like she's trying to put up a strong front, like nothing's really bothering her. At first, I think it is because she does have a little bit of control. So she's like, no, I got this. But also she tries to keep up a strong front so she doesn't worry her dad. It's like, no, I got this, because she knows this. Like by doing this, she's willing to do whatever it takes because it meant bringing her family back together. It's like she no longer had to be separated from any of them, nor had to be separated from Klaus anymore. So she was willing to make that sacrifice, but at first it's because she also thought like, no, I can handle this. I'm strong, I can. But then eventually it starts wearing to the point like she's hearing the voices. It's kind of driving her a little insane. Even the bracelet that kind of helped bind her before isn't working anymore because now it's actually starting to burn because I guess what's inside of her. Like I said, and I brought it up last episode, they're not even referring it by name. It's just calling like what she's absorbing inside. They're not even going like, oh yeah, the hollow. It's just so interesting to me. They don't even call it by its name even. Because I guess once again, it's just the fact is the hollow itself is dead, but everything that it is and that it represents is there. Because I mean, truth be told, is she is dead. She just entered Hope's body last season, so I guess it's just everything that she was is just kind of there. Once again, I completely forgot her name because I always refer to her as the hollow. Nevertheless. But when the time came, like she tried to fix this on her own because like if anything happens, it's my fault. It's not your responsibility to constantly pick up and fix all my mistakes, Dad. Because for her, it's like it's her trying to like because it's something like it's a conversation between Klaus and Freya that led to this point. Because it's like. Because now I can understand a little bit more when Freya is coming from. Because for Freya, it's like she was going to do this regardless of what I said. At the very least, if I helped her, I thought maybe, hopefully she could handle it. And that basically, if we show support, she would come to us for help, when things got too tough. At the same time, Hope is too stubborn. She knows if she, like I said, doesn't show that she can handle this, everyone's going to freak out. She's not trying to worry her family. Like so much has been lost already. She doesn't want to lose her family anymore. I mean, I don't know if there's any means. I would feel like the only means of fixing this would be like separating it into the other like four again, but maybe that won't work this time. Maybe because it's all in her again. I mean, also Hope probably would fight like hell, be like, no, you're not going to do that. We're not going to do that. We're not going to put this family back through that, so there's that. But then there's the whole thing about her and Elijah. When she had the chance, she was going hard on Elijah. And that's the sad thing is because obviously she talks about the fact is that the voices went away when she gave into her anger. She was messing up Elijah. At the same time, Elijah's fine with it. He blames himself for what happened to Haley. Like, yes, like he didn't directly kill her, but indirectly by his inaction, she died because he interfered. Like memory loss or not, it's like I still have to. It was his way of punishing stuff, which he kind of does on another way to it, but I'll kind of get to that soon enough. But for Hope, it's like the voices went away when she gave into the anger. And I think that's what makes the situation even sadder because that being inside of her now is at the worst possible time. It would have been already hard enough beforehand, but all that Hope's going through, all the sadness and anger over losing Haley and the anger she has towards Elijah, that he's family, he's her uncle, but at the same time it's like she holds him so responsible for what happened to like Haley. Like I said, that was out of his control, but it's just a set of circumstances that led us down to this point. The reason why he got rid of his memory in the first place was so he could stay separated from his family to keep you all safe, and that just inadvertently led to the events being to where they are now, and it's just sad, and so I don't know if there is any repairing the relationship between them because, like, I'm sure every time she looks at Elijah, she just sees the man that's responsible for her mom's death, So, and Elijah, look at the mirror, he sees the same thing. So, Klaus is there, and it's kind of interesting, kind of puts a little interesting twist to it where it's like, yeah, like, oh, if it's someone you need to help with, like, violent, like someone to understand the whole violence and anger situation, he's like, I'm the perfect parent for that. Like, what way that's going to come out, I don't know, maybe it's going to be his way of kind of getting her to, like, well, because he can help her embrace that side, but is he? I think I don't know if he outright meant, because I thought at a moment, I was like, oh, does that mean you're going to join up with her to wipe out all the, like, the purest vampires, the ones who believes in this whole purity crap? Like, I'm wondering, was that what I thought that was going to be his angle? Doesn't seem like it is, but potentially that could be in the future. But maybe it's like him trying to get her to focus her anger on specific targets, kind of being, probably almost turn her into a little mini him, which obviously he doesn't want. He doesn't want to hope to be anything like him. He wants her to be better than him. But I'm just curious to see what, in the end, what Klaus ends up doing about the situation going forward. Like, obviously, he's going to stay there and try to help her deal with all of this, you know? There's only so much she can do on her own with this. So it's definitely going to be interesting going forward to see how this all plays out. Yeah, obviously, you know, Freya feels guilt about this, too, because, like I said, she's like, when she looks at Hope, she sees like the daughter that she herself never had. Like, obviously, once again, that's something that's come up. It's like she's never had a chance to live her life. Like, none of them will ever have the opportunity to have what Klaus has, having Hope. That's why she's so special, because she's like a child for everyone. Like, that's why she holds the, like, hopes and dreams, hence the name of like the whole Michelson family, because she's the next generation. She's potentially the only generation if things don't change, you know. Freya's circumstances have made it so she can never have kids. At least she, throughout her entire life, she's never had. It doesn't mean her and Keelan can eventually start their own family, but still, you know. So it's just kind of an interesting thing. A big thing that came up this episode, obviously the continuation with the purist, is Marcel. It's kind of interesting. It wasn't until Josh kind of pointed out, I never brought up the comparison, because basically Emmett and his group of purists, they want New Orleans to go back to the way it was basically in season 1, the segregation between the different supernatural groups. Because it's like, oh yeah, it's like, oh, we don't have to kill anyone. We just have the wolves go back to the woods, the witches stay in their place, and vampires re-roll a quarter, like where we should belong to be, where we belong at the top of the food chain. But it wasn't until Josh made Marcel realize that the reason why this is all being built off the foundation of what Marcel started. And it took all these events for Marcel to realize kind of what he did was wrong. Because in his mind, it's like, yeah, like I thought the werewolves were uncontrollable, like beasts, and the vampires, like those are my people. So I guess now he's looking at things from an outside perspective, him not really being part of the vampire group. There's that whole stipulation. So he's not part of the purity as well. But also like having, you know, changed so much over the course of this series, over the course of these 15 years, apparently, when you acclimate all the time skips and stuff like that, since the very beginning of this series back in season 1, like, he's changed a lot because he's grown attached to different people from these different groups. His friends is not just people he's trying to rule over as a king. So once again, not ruling as king probably gave him even more insight into situations. So now he realizes, like, because in his mind, it's like, as long as there was no problems, as long as the city stayed in that, like, in his mind, it's like, oh yeah, then everything's fine and dandy. But it's like, no, because he didn't care too much about what everyone else was dealing with, their personal issues. It's like, no, the city didn't fall apart. So obviously I did my job well, not really caring too much about the finer details in the situation. So, but because of that, he is willing to fight for the werewolves, because it's like, they don't deserve to be treated the way they do, because this is just as much their home as it is the witches, as it is the vampires. This isn't just one group's home, it's everyone's home. And it kind of put Vincent in his compromising position, because it's like, as where does him and he kind of speaks for the witches, so where do they stand? He's like, you can join with me. And it's like, well, this way everyone gets left alone. But it's something Ivy had talked about, because for him, it's like, as long as we stay out of this, things will kind of get settled. It's like, no, once Emmett and his group are done with the werewolves, they're going to move on to us, because we're the next logical step. You know, it's just kind of, because witches, even with their powers and stuff like that, still fall in that category of humans. So they're probably still looked at as lesser species. Like, oh, we can take advantage or what you have having magic and stuff like that. So they'll kind of be treated the same way Marcel treated witches back in the day, more like a tool rather than people just kind of treating them more like a tool and an asset. Like I said, it's just kind of an interesting thing to kind of like break down and think about. But in the end, Vincent chose to work with the werewolves because he saw what Emmett was willing to do. He's trying to make it seem like, oh, it's all peaceful, but the moment the werewolves won't back down, he set up a bomb that killed Lucina, as well as many others. It made him freak out because he saw blood on Ivy, thought she could have been her. Keelan was caught up in all of it. It's just like kind of showing like how barbaric they can be, that they aren't like here to keep everything separated for peace. They're keeping everything separated for the because it's kind of like something I think is a theme that you could make the argument for. Is like because together they're stronger against this group, but obviously this group is kind of pushing and trying to divide them. I mean, we don't know how many vampires like. Because I'm sure all those people with Emmett, like, I don't know if those are people who, I mean, it seems like there's a lot of those people from outside of New Orleans who have come to make New Orleans their own, but maybe they're people who'd already always thought like that, but it took, Greta coming to make them kind of like, oh man, yeah, she's 100% right. Maybe she was able to kind of use her silver tongue, probably much like August, to like sway them to decide like how many of those vampires are naturally from New Orleans is the question. Are some of them from New Orleans or all of them from New Orleans? I got the impression they were kind of, a lot of them are from all over the world and they all kind of came together. Like they always been a part of this group and now they're just kind of trying to spread their hate, so. But sadly for Vincent, choosing this side kind of backfires on him because ultimately witches die. Not all of them, but select few. The one in particular that would matter the most to him is Ivy dying. Witches in general dying would suck, but it's because he got close to Ivy. They even had their first kiss. The moment they're like, oh no, come back from this, I was like, oh, one of them's about to die, aren't they? I mean, like, Ivy came close. I was like, maybe they're not going to kill her since they came so close. It's like, nope, they killed her. Maybe that was kind of foreshadowing. Like, oh, she got away from it. Nope, she's dead. Because it turns out they were working with a witch. And we saw a glimpse of that witch. We didn't see their face, but they're the ones who served the drinks that basically poisoned everyone. I'm blanking. I don't remember because I'm sure it comes up like witches can be compelled too, right? Or at least like maybe their magic naturally prevents them from being compelled. I don't remember. I'm blanking on that coming up before. I'm sure it probably has come up before. Maybe it's kind of, I don't remember. I know humans just tend to be the ones that get compelled, but maybe witches just naturally because of their magic have a natural block, or just because witches are like, no, we're not stupid. We stay on Vervain, so we know exactly how to, they know to avoid being compelled by vampires, so they're all on Vervain, so they can't be. So the question is then, like, whoever this witch is, why did you decide to join with him? I guess for them, it's kind of like, no, I'm fine with things being separate as they are, because it's like Vincent choosing his side meant that, like, it's like, no, we have to make them all suffer, because the fact of the matter is they're choosing the wrong side of things. Like, we are jeopardizing our own group and we're letting Vincent lead us to our destruction. That might be the argument that can be made. Or once again, maybe it is simply the fact is maybe there's a witch that was captured and that was drained of the Vervain in their system and they got compelled. I don't know. Like I said, they went out of their way to hide your person's identity, so it's definitely going to be interesting. It's obviously going to be someone specific, but specifically who, whether it's someone that we really know. I mean, I just think it's interesting that they hid their identity. But I guess that's just supposed to be so that later on you don't know who did it. They know there's a witch there, but I guess that's because it's going to flow into the storyline so that it could keep you guessing as well, not just Vincent and the others. So, like I said, it's just sad because for Vincent, him and Ivy, it's like they don't have the future together that they were really kind of hoping for. Especially for him, it's because Ivy was the hope. Because, Vincent was kind of very pessimistic and stuff like that. But he made her kind of see... She made him kind of see that, there's light in any darkness, that, even at no matter the night, there will always be a dawn. Like I said, she was a lot more optimistic than he was, and I'm sure this is going to send him kind of spiraling back. It's going to be very interesting to see what Vincent does going forward. I doubt this is going to make him second guess joining, because it's like no matter what, like the fact of the matter is Emmett's made his move and there's no going back for Vincent. It's like he's going to have to live with that regret of making that choice that puts Ivy's life as well as others' lives, it costing them their lives, but this is going to motivate him even more to fight back. So I'm interested to see what goes down. Also, it's going to motivate him heavily to kind of root out the witch that was working with him and punish them, most likely himself, to make them pay for this. So, and maybe that person will try and speak up and try and tell him like, oh yeah, this is all Vincent's fault, blah, 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 blah. Like, he led us down this path in the first place. At least this way, vampires get their way. They take care of the werewolves. We get left alone. The Emmett and the others promise, probably the same promise that he made to Vincent, he probably made to someone else, and they just agreed, because they didn't like the way Vincent was running things. They felt like, oh yeah, like things have been okay for a little while, but it's just like things have been bubbling beneath the surface. Anyway, that whole thing. So, like I said, it's going to be interesting to see what he does. But the other side of things, kind of going back to Elijah, is he ends up talking to Declan, which Declan returns. Freya kind of gives lame excuses about everything. It's like, oh yeah, Haley died in a car accident. I left you a voicemail. He's like, yeah, but you never got back to me. It's like, well, things have been complicated. He wants to see Hope, but Freya's kind of like, oh, that's not the best thing, especially with what Hope's going through, not just emotionally, but physically, what's going down in her body with the hollow in her and everything. But what caught me by surprise was Elijah sat down and talked to him. I figured as much as like he wanted to kind of like. Declan later on says it's like, oh, you're trying to appease your own pain. It's like, no, I think he wanted to talk with you to he wanted to see what Haley's life has been like these past 7 years. It was also a means of punishing himself. It's like, yeah, past you, Haley was able to find happiness again. But it's like, even Declan was going to like propose to her and everything. He talked about going to see her grandmother. Was he talking about himself or Haley's? I mean, nevertheless, it was like about getting the ring and everything, and was going to propose to her. And, Elijah talks about stuff that, he wasn't just talking about Declan when he was talking about the whole, like, oh yeah, you feel her touch, you see her always in your dreams. And the fact of the matter is wishing that you knew a little bit more so that you could have done more. And it wasn't just him talking for Declan. He was also talking from his own personal experience. And Declan pieced it together. It's like, oh, you are who I think you are. And so in the end, after seeing what Hope did to him, he ended up telling Declan the truth and explaining everything. But for him, it's like, I didn't know anything about Haley. I thought I did. I mean, granted, he still doesn't, because it's interesting because the conversation never went there, but let's not forget about Cammy, who is his cousin. Like, she got caught up in the middle of all of this too. But Elijah, to kind of ease his pain, is like, no, like, she did love you. He's like, I'm sure of that. And I'm doing what I know she would want to be done. And it's like easing his mind, basically being like, she loved you and you loved her, getting rid of any questions, like forget having any questions. Just know that Haley is at peace. And that seems to appease him. So it seems that he's good. Whether that comes back or not, I don't know. That's what I kept wondering, is like, what are they going to do with the whole Declan situation? But I think it's kind of Declan's situation is kind of set up to kind of help not only Elijah deal with his pain, is what I think it kind of is. Even then, it doesn't begin because, like I said, Elijah will probably never forgive himself for what happens, especially because he knows Hope will probably never forgive him for that, and he doesn't. Elijah, being who he is, doesn't think he deserves forgiveness. Like, Elijah has always been the most regretful for them. A lot of stuff isn't, like, I think amongst any of the family members, like, everyone in the family has their regrets, but I feel like he has always been, as the eldest brother, he's always. Was it him or is it Finn who's the oldest? Finn's the eldest brother, isn't he? Because I know amongst the siblings, Freya's the eldest, but it's like amongst the brothers, who is it? I mean, for such a long time, he was the eldest sibling. I kind of feel, I can't remember if Finn's the second, like, is it Finn, him, or is it him or Finn that's actually the oldest? I mean, obviously, he's always kind of been the oldest nonetheless, even if he isn't necessarily, because he's always taken the most responsibility for the rest of the family. But also, he puts himself on a much higher standard. And, like, he puts all of him and his siblings on a high standard because it's like, oh, he knows that they can be better and himself being better. So he puts himself on an even higher degree, like, of scrutiny, so he won't forgive himself easily for this. So I'm sure Klaus still has his reservations too, but for him, it's like, I have my brother back, and it's like, I see that he's suffering with it, and it's like, I'm sad that he's in pain, but it's good to know that I have my brother back, and it's like, it's good that he is dealing with this, like, because this is a pain that the family should feel together, so I don't know, it's just kind of an interesting thing. So I'm curious to see if anything else comes from the Declan situation or not. Does he actually work? But remember, like, no one wanted to tell him the truth about what was going on. Freya wanted to, but Vincent was going to, but didn't the moment he found out that was Cammy's brother. So we'll see in the end what happens, whether anything else comes from that or not. Like I said, this is a great episode. Things continue to heat up all across the board. Obviously, things are like, New Orleans is being set up as like a war zone between the vampires that are on Marcel and Josh's side, who are siding with the werewolves, who the witches. Like, it's going to turn into a big clash. And in the center of all of this is everything that's happening with Hope. There's still other questions we still have to ask ourselves too. Like, we haven't seen her, but what about Antoinette? We haven't seen her since last episode. What about Roman? I guess maybe they tracked each other down and maybe they're together. Like, whether Antoinette ends up playing her own role in this or not, we'll kind of have to wait and see. Whether it's just kind of where she's completely gone from the storyline, I don't know. We'll have to see what the next episode has in store for us with all of this. Because there's also this whole thing with Rebecca, too. It's like, oh, yeah, Rebecca is gone for a few days to go handle some stuff. Like, they didn't really say much about it, but it's like, yeah, Cole's going back to Davina, which I'm wondering, I'm sure Davina will probably want to come back in the moment she hears stuff is going down like this because of Vincent as well as everyone else. Like, that's what I'm thinking. Maybe it won't go down like that, but I'd assume so, just for the purposes of New Orleans is still her home and everything, and it's still Cole's home, so she might be the one to kind of convince him to come back and fight for it. I mean, maybe not next episode, but maybe before the end of the series. Who knows? Like I said, in the end, we'll have to wait and see what happens. And now moving on to this week's episode, Colony, a great episode. In this episode, we pick things up with Will and Broussard. Kind of found out how he snuck his way in there. He's kept a low profile thanks to Amy, which I kept referring, Peyton List's character, where I kept referring to her as Lawrence because I thought that was what she was saying her name. Nevertheless, she's Amy, so maybe they were saying that before, but for the past time, just constantly referred to her as Lawrence. That's whatever the case may be. It's Amy. And so apparently they're keeping their eyes on this courier who's leaving a building, and he keeps doing it, like obviously keeping up with his routine and stuff like that. I thought it was kind of a really nice touch that Amy, I guess she's very good at reading people. I mean, I know she's a doctor and everything, but maybe that's just kind of maybe on part of her study with psychology too, because she's able to pick up on stuff. Because she was able to pick up pretty quickly, like, yeah, your friend Will, yeah, I don't know, something about him doesn't seem right, because she's like, something bad happened to him and he's just not dealing with it. It's like, you know that on the head pretty hard, because could you even tell when he was with Broussard, he did something risky. The fact of the matter is, he went up to the dude to test his security. It's like, yeah, but he went about it a very rash way. It's like, he didn't talk to Broussard about doing it. Like, he just did it spur of the moment. Like, just because, and it's something that Amy kind of talks about. It's like, oh, I can't believe you're willing just to compartmentalize in your brain because you're not too worried about how things could go wrong. It's like, you still have a family to worry about, which obviously kind of pissed him off a little bit. But I think it's for Will, it's just because he doesn't care anymore. Like, it's just that sad fact is he lost his son, and he's just kind of lost, and he's kind of let everything kind of fall to the wayside. His marriage, his children, they can kind of sense it, but he's just in a rut because I'm sure because he blames himself, because it's like, yeah, Charlie was separated from us because of me. I was supposed to pick him up, but I didn't. And then now it's just like they got Charlie back, and it's just been one thing after another. And it's just like he feels, most likely feels like he didn't protect his son. So that's a heavy burden to carry, even living on without the fact is like your son's gone. It's a hard burden to kind of continue living on after that. So what's kind of interesting, and what I don't really know 100%, is how much Broussard knows, because he references Charlie later on, which is interesting, and it pisses Will off. He's like, don't ever say his name again. So, because, I mean, when we saw the camp, when Broussard and Amy got there were no bodies under tarp, so either they disposed of the bodies, or maybe they were in, the back area. So he must have looked at the bodies and found out about, must have found Charlie's body like that. But I assume that they got rid of all the bodies. I don't know. I feel like, would they care enough to get rid of the bodies, or would they just leave them there, bury them, whatever the case may be? Like I said, the place was empty when Broussard and Amy showed up. But like I said, maybe that's just because the bodies were in the back instead of, or at least away from the area that they entered into, the resistance camp. Or did Will go into specifics about everything that happened? Because we never got the conversation about what exactly went down in the resistance camp. We haven't heard, they didn't get that side of the story, so it must have been something that happened off screen that Broussard got those answers, because it never comes up in the conversation. I guess it'd be a lot to kind of recap, because it's not like he even tells Broussard about the fact is, it's like, oh yeah, the Raps potentially have an enemy that, I guess because for right now, Will's so focused on what's right now in front of him, he doesn't care about this. He no longer probably cares. It's just kind of, he's living his life here. No matter how much he hates Seattle, his family's happy and safe, but I guess that just gives him room where he feels like he can just be stuck in his melancholy. But it's just kind of I guess for him, the fight is over, so he doesn't care as much anymore. So that's why he doesn't, I think working with Broussard just gave him an excuse to do something. It just made him have something else to focus on, put another fight in front of him so he doesn't have to worry. Interestingly enough, Broussard sees what Katie's situation was and decided, yeah, it's probably most likely not the best idea to be asking her, considering what her job is. There's already enough eyes on her, so it probably would have been even more of an issue. So probably not even just who Katie is now, but maybe, I don't know, it's kind of interesting considering the fact is that she was the one that joined up with his resistance and stuff like that. So it's just kind of interesting to see that he doesn't go to her first, he goes to Will. But I guess because he felt like Will was kind of the man to go to, after everything that they've been through. So, which once again is just interesting, but I guess it's hard to say whether it's just 100% because of Katie's position, or does he look at Katie like he's observed her and so he's like, oh man, she's actually living this up. This isn't her just faking it like maybe she did in LA, but now it's like, no, she's enjoying his life, so it's just kind of interesting, which we'll get to Katie's stuff soon enough. But during the operation, that they were gathered, going to hit that target, Will bails at the last minute because he saw Snyder, which kind of set him off. So, which Broussard tried to defend him to Amy by being like, oh, I'm sure Will had his reasons for doing what he did. So they still were able to get away with what they got away with, but whatever it is very important. The fact of the matter is, it looks like it's some host tech, some tech from the Raps. It seems, I don't know what the best way to kind of compare this material to. Maybe you could make the argument, like, maybe if you compare it to like Marvel Vibranium, maybe kind of goes to thing, because it seems like it's a material that not only it kind of reacts on its own, but also like to other things. Like you shoot a bullet at it, it kind of it kind of blocks it. It almost kind of like absorbs the impact of it and just kind of like it kind of comes in almost like bends like almost like elastic, but it's not. It even seems like it wraps around stuff near it, so it reacts to things, interestingly enough. So it's like, oh, where did this come from? This is beyond human tech, so obviously it's got to be from the Raps, because we now know that Kynes, Wayne Brady's character, has a close tie with the host. Like, we know he had a meeting with them and everything. They gave him some tech that he uses to grow food. That's how Seattle doesn't like not starve. So it's because they're able to grow food because of tech that they gave. But it's like the host trusts you amongst anyone enough to give you stuff. Why? What did he talk to the host about for them to be so candid about giving him some of their tech? And I could only assume that this was more tech being delivered to him, because it's something that obviously Snyder's playing along, being like, oh, how do you do this? Like, oh, wow. Like, he's trying to play nice with Kynes, but at the same time, it's like, I know that he's up to something. Because, like, he was sent here specifically, not just to see how things are run in Seattle. So, like, oh, other places can copy it, like LA and stuff. It's like, no, it's because the higher ups. I mean, because I was wondering about it, because the last time we heard from Snyder, it's like he was going to Switzerland. So I'm guessing he's talking to even more higher ups in the food chain who are just kind of like, yeah, we need to find out what he's up to, because there's no occupation set up there. So, like, whatever he does is kept secret. Like, no one knows what he's up to. The hosts have an idea, whether they have an idea of what everything that he's up to. Like, that's what I'm curious about. Like, the whole weapon that's supposed to be built there. Like, do they know that? I mean, maybe that's why they sent Snyder, why they have such a concern, because the weapon is being built there. So they're like, what is he up to? Or maybe a lot of people don't know about this. Like, only Broussard, Amy, now Will. Maybe like they're the only few and just everywhere that knows about this information. It's hard to say at this time. Like, obviously, like, Snyder is there trying to figure things out. He's like, it's actually a good thing that he's in contact with the host, which I don't know. I guess maybe that means that whatever he's doing isn't completely out there. It is, the fact is that he has a relationship with the Raps must mean that they are okay with everything he's doing, so he's not doing anything too out there. I guess could be the argument that it could be made, or at the very least, I mean, because it seems, because the way Snyder was talking about it too, it's like he has access that no one has. It's like no one has that close access to him, which is kind of interesting considering, like, I mean, I'm sure there's people who exist who do, but there's probably like very, very high up on the food chain, not someone who just runs one specific spot. But once again, like, obviously he's important because, like, his algorithm, it's like, I mean, obviously he foresaw a lot of stuff coming, and obviously people calling him to fix the situation. You know, it's like he turned, like, obviously there's a lot to Seattle that we still don't know about, like what he's keeping secret. That's kind of what's going to be going forward with him, because it's like, Will is like, yo, you want to get some information about what's going on? Snyder has access to it because he'll break easily. But then Will's also, I mean, which, to be fair, it's like Snyder can break without breaking, because he'll slip out information just because he knows how to play the game, because he's kind of a rat. But at the same time, it might be a little differently because he sees that it's Will. I'm interested to see what happens when those two finally meet again after all this time. But the question then becomes like, oh, well, Will wants to kill him afterwards, so that's kind of his main focus. Like, it won't make him feel any better. It might even make him worse off, the whole thing about vengeance and stuff like that. But it's definitely going to be interesting to see what that means. It's also going to be interesting to see how this all works for Amy, Broussard, and Will kind of working together. Like, that's kind of like an odd paired bunch. It's also interesting that obviously Will's just so caught up in his own thing. He's not telling Katie anything. I guess because Katie's so caught up in her own world. Like, obviously, like, for him, it's like she enjoys a life here and stuff like that. She doesn't want to jeopardize it. So for him, it's just kind of like, it's not worth telling her Broussard's here and stuff like that. But also because I guess at the same time, he doesn't really care too much. Like I said, this is his fight. So he's not trying to like, oh, like, I'm trying to take down this, like, say the word. It's like, no, he doesn't care. He just wants a target in front of him, something he can point a gun at or point his fist at. He just needs something to let out all this anger and sadness he has. So he's not trying to bring Katie in and like, oh yeah, we can pick up the resistance and blah. No, he has no, like, I don't think he has those thoughts. Maybe he does, but and no, also I guess it's also because of where him and Katie are. It's a complicated situation, so. And since we are talking about her, let's talk about Katie's side of the episode. She ends up confronting Michelle about everything, but Michelle's like, what? You went there? That's crazy. Like, it's this and that. Oh, people must be moving around. But Katie follows one of the buses, and it drops people off. Because there's a, like, recording saying, like, oh, we're short on housing. It's like, BS. There's a whole housing unit that you lied about dropping people off to that's completely empty, so there's plenty of housing, but for some reason they're sending people elsewhere. My opinion was the fact is that it had to have something to do with like what they're building. They need people, you know, because you have that old man, but it's like, well, that old man could be like an engineer for all we know, so it's like sending them specifically there. Like if you meet a certain criteria, you're being sent off somewhere else. Like I said, I guess I get the feeling like it's more like a factory situation, but even Kate is like, even she doesn't know where they're being sent off to. She confronts Michelle, but what does Michelle tell her? Like, live your life, ignore all this. Because for her before, it was kind of like, oh, you struggled so hard, you remember what it was like to be on the other side. So basically, like, don't jeopardize this. You have your family to think about, and that's a tough thing for Katie. It's like, oh, she likes it here, but at the same time, it's not what she thought it was. She thought like, oh man, this is a great place, great opportunity. For her, she kind of doing the same thing as Will, just kind of going about it a different way. She escaped in a different way. Will is kind of wallowing in his sadness. Katie's trying to be productive. She's trying to be like, I think, to compensate for like Charlie being gone, she's trying to like help other people's families. Like maybe she can fill that hole in her heart by helping other people and kind of focusing on her own family. But even then, her family's still kind of slipping through the cracks, much like Will. You know, like I said, they're kind of both handling their sadness in very different ways, not communicating, sadly. But even when she tries to talk to Will, he kind of brushes off. I guess just because it's too hard and too painful, and it's just too much that neither one of them could bring themselves to talk after all this time. I mean, like, once again, we don't know how much time has passed. I can only assume it's been like months maybe, but at the same time, it's just kind of like, I guess there's no easy way to just start talking now. Because Will always felt like Katie blamed him the first time everything went down with Charlie, like in the whole Santa Monica situation. Maybe he feels like that now she blames him. Maybe on some level he blames her because it's like all the whole like going to the resistance camp thing was your idea, was your fault. This was your mission to take up. I didn't want to have anything to do with it. I just wanted to be off the radar, but you insisted upon this mission. We were happy where we are. So there might be some resentment there, you know, so. But it seems like Katie's going back to her job. Whether that 100% sticks or not, I don't know. Like I said, she's not trying to jeopardize the life that she's built for her family. So yeah, Seattle might not have its secrets, but if it means putting her family in a safe place, at least for now, I mean, even she doesn't, you know, the walls are starting to crack around her. So it's like, does she 100% see it as a safe place, or is it just because she feels like she has no other alternative? I mean, it's definitely going to be interesting to see what happens going forward with that. Then there's the whole Bram situation, which Bram is now working with Patrol. Like, Katie's like, wait, when did you get this job? You didn't really talk to his mom about it, didn't talk to his dad about it, just kind of took the job. Because for him, it's like his biggest concern is Gracie. It's like, oh, I get my own place. You could go to this different school potentially. She's like, I'd rather, she has friends and stuff like that. But at the same time, it's like, she'd also want to stay at home because I think she's very smart. So she realizes what Bram's kind of insinuating. But she talks about like, oh, what about your girlfriend? And he's like, oh, what girlfriend? Like, his sister's smarter than he kind of gives her credit for. But even he admits like, yeah, you're pretty smart. His girlfriend, what's her name, Meadow? Interestingly enough, I don't know if I brought this up last episode, but that's the same actress who played the main character's best ghost friend in Ghost Wars. If you've never seen the show, that's that. But if you have, it's like, oh yeah, like I don't know if I brought that up last episode or not, but really quickly, I think I feel a little suspicious about her because the fact that she's like, oh, when am I going to meet your family? Which is like, obviously it's a thing you mention with boyfriend and girlfriend. I mean, at the same time, Bram's like, yeah, my family's got its complicated issues. Plus, like, it's like their family's supposed to be staying under the radar too, which obviously they're not under the radar anyway. People know exactly what they are. Part of me wonders, is that like, I get this inkling, like, because she's like, oh, I want to meet your family. It's like, oh, you get to meet Gracie, and she's like, oh, I'm happy about it. I'm like, you're up to something. are you dating Bram on purpose? Because like I said, they going into Seattle, they know exactly who the Bowman family was. So I'm thinking like she was kind of meant to get close to him for the purpose of getting close to the family to find out whatever it is that they're. That's what I got, that sinking feeling. Maybe it's not. Maybe it is simply like, oh, they're in love and she just wants to meet his family. But part of me is just very suspicious of her. We'll see if anything comes. But just her being like, oh, I want to meet your family, maybe go, wait, what? Okay. Okay. And she was kind of bummed about not meeting his family, which, like I said, once again, it's like, oh, you met my family. So, yeah, a typical relationship thing. But like I said, I am very skeptical, but we'll see if anything comes about it. But I'm obviously also skipping over the thing that happened at the beginning of the episode. We saw that dude escaping. We see all those pods we saw kind of a little bit last season. That dude ended up killing a lot of people in his escape. Do know that they were trying not to use lethal force on him. They're like, oh, that outlier has been captured again. So once again, especially with a name like Outlier, we go back to all the people on the list, like Will, because even one of the drones, it was red and then it turned blue and didn't do anything to stop the dude. Didn't kill him like they normally would. So obviously he's very important. Hence also people using tasers and not weapons, trying not to use lethal force. The question, he even spit up green goo. What that was about, I don't know. Obviously he was in a pod and stuff like that, but he managed to escape somehow. So the question then still becomes, well, what is that all about? Once again, that's my thought process. Like, he seemed like he was very well skilled too. So it goes back to what I was saying. Like, I'm still running with the two big theories of like, obviously Kynes has had something to do with it. Like one of the things he had to approach the host about was this specific thing, like these pods and stuff like that. Because for me, like my thought was like, oh yeah, they're people from certain backgrounds with tactics and training that the hosts want to use as a weapon against the enemy that they have. Like my thought process about this has changed. Like obviously like last season I was like, oh, are these supposed to be like body replacements for the host? But now this season my thought process has been more like, no, you're more after their minds, maybe even their bodies. They're like, these outliers are supposed to be like specific humans who fit a certain criteria that can be used as they're supposed to be their army against what's coming potentially with their skills, their backgrounds, military stuff like that. That's kind of been my thought process, but was more so that. But then it was kind of like, oh, maybe then I start thinking Kynes was the one who set this in motion. Like some of the data he had collected, like when we first saw him pop up in the show in the past, like I was thinking maybe that was kind of like tied to why this whole thing is happening. So I don't know, we'll see. But definitely like, and it seems like whatever that thing is, it's in the heart of Seattle, because the place that Kynes and Snyder were going to, like out there, that like Will had referenced, it seems like that was there because like we saw it when the dude was escaping. You could see the city out in the distance, so it's nearby. So whether Snyder got to see everything that was going down there, he didn't really reference it too much. Maybe he did specifically and I just didn't catch it, or maybe he just showed him kind of the base level surface of what's going on down there, not telling him everything. Like I said, I don't know. It's a great episode and I'm so very interested to see where all this kind of takes us in the next episode going forward. It's going to be very, very interesting turn of events. And now moving on to this week's episode of Reverie, a great episode. A lot of stuff went down in this episode, so let's break things down bit by bit. It turns out that a BCI was stolen, and as well as an ejector. But even though they're kind of cheap to buy anyway, someone still stole them anyway. And it turns out the reason why is because the person behind this is Glenn. He knew he couldn't get one through legal means because he has his little compulsions, his OCD, where it's like he can't go outside. Noises, sunlight is too much. And even then, like everything has to be in a particular order. But for him, it's like, obviously Reverie is meant to be a place where it's like, oh, you can live out your fantasies and stuff like that. And it turns out, well, I'll go ahead and talk, I'll talk about it a little bit more later on, but nevertheless, it turns out Mara talks to him and gets to understand, like, oh yeah, all of this isn't about Glenn himself. Like all of this is actually about Quincy, the boy next door. Because like Quincy and his mom have become a part of his life, because for him, the only access to the world he has obviously is through that window, and he saw their lives. Like they became a part of his life, a really good part of his life. And so he's invested in them. He cares about them, But because of his convulsions and stuff like that, he can't be there to help them. So for him, this whole Reverie situation is about stealing medicine because he's not a part of Quincy isn't part of a trial that could actually help him. It's actually kind of interesting. And I like that Glenn broke it down that basically it's like he has this sickness that basically breaking it down, science reason why it's like his lungs suck and we don't know why. It's kind of like the big explanation for his disease. And everything he did, like all the 4 different reveries he created were all, well, 3 of them were about the case specifically, but one of them was just outside because it's like, oh yeah, the fountain was there because that was him getting access to outside, being somewhere he couldn't go because it gave him, it would bring him closer to them is what that was all about. So I thought that was kind of like this beautiful reason behind all of this. He did this because he cared about some kid that would, he had his issues, but he tried to find a way around it. And I love that Mara ended up helping him. I knew that you could tell the whole thing was probably staged, but they did such a beautiful way of like keeping everything in order. I mean, it turns out like this was all, because I was like, oh, did they fake it? Did they include fake people in it? It's like, no, they kept everything normal, but it was just kind of like a simulation to show like, oh yeah, that Glenn could break through your defenses. And it was kind of supposed to be seen as kind of a trial thing, but I thought it was so beautifully done. Him skipping, like Mara teaching him how to just skip on the blue because blue is one of the things. And he came up with this entire plan and, she was able to help him, move past the fact is like rolling the dice in his fingers and also thinking about Quincy and moving forward, like not letting anything stop him. So, and when it was all said and done, he was able to do it by himself. It was like, yeah, it's one of those victory moments. And I think personally, this is one of those things that this show nails. It's because that's what Mara wants to do. She wants to help people. Like, obviously, this was all they could have, like, probably swung it it helped in the long run. So it's kind of like you give them what they want to give you something in return. Like, they ended up putting Quincy on a trial for it because it's like, look, we proved that, like, your defenses aren't that great at this company thanks to Glenn. So I was like, what favor do you want instead of being paid for it? So I thought that was all beautifully done. It's like they weren't going to, but it was more so. It was a combination of, for one, it was Mara helping him get over everything, kind of getting past his fears and kind of being able to focus and do what he needed to do, so to help him in the long run, but also because it just helped in the side of trying to help Quincy. Like, I just love how it kind of went hand in hand. I thought that was so beautifully done. To the point, like, even Quincy's mom is surprised at the end. Like, obviously, she hugs him, and at first, obviously, you can tell it bothers him, but he kind of, like, hugs her back, and he's like, no, we'll tell Quincy together. She's like, oh, okay. And so, saying that things are working out, and I thought that was such a neat thing, Because you can tell, I had a feeling that this had to do something with Quincy, because the fact is that, the whole, like, they set it up that obviously he had to go to the doctor. It's like, oh, only one shot this time, I promise. So I think that was a beautiful, like, part of the episode. Now, the other side of things, or where things get very, very interesting, is that we find out the whole situation where we left Mara at the end of last episode was a derealization thing. Like, it was an episode like none before. Like, obviously, she saw Bryn before, but this time she saw an entire house. Like, she went somewhere that she never actually went. She was actually just standing in the middle of the road. Luckily, this dude named Oliver Hill saved her. Turns out Oliver is actually connected to Nerion. It turns out that he was actually one of the co-creators of the Reverie situation. Like, him and Alexis came to, well, not Reverie specifically, but the BCI. They're the ones that came together. He was the brains, she was the computer. But then he starts bringing up stuff, and it's kind of like, oh man, maybe there's like a lot more insidious stuff to this whole situation, because it's like, oh, the fact of the matter is Charlie and the others knew that there was a problem and they kicked me out. They're going to tell you I'm crazy. They're going to tell you this and that. But then it starts coming up from Mara, because she has ample reason to start believing that, because it's like, wait, you guys are telling me stuff I didn't know before. Like, before this all started, you didn't tell me about the derealization. You didn't tell me about the whole Alexis brother being Dylan situation. You didn't tell me about this whole dark Reverie thing, which is kind of an interesting plot element that pops up this episode, but obviously it's going to be a bigger thing later on, continue on, but and whether it's going to be a plot it seems like it's a plot development aspect, but the dark Reverie is basically there are limitations put on a Reverie. It almost seemed like Paul was one of the people who pushes for limits, and it seems like the way the conversation going, it made it almost seem like Charlie might not be, it's hard to say, but for him it's like the dark Reverie, like there are certain things like impulses and fantasies that people have that we're not willing to let them, like, someone might have some dark twisted shit they want to try out. It's like, so we put limits in the Reverie so that you can't just do everything. Like it's like, oh, you got thoughts here and there, and like, oh yeah, that's good, but it's like you could start going down some dark path. It's like, no, we make sure that you don't. But the dark Reverie, like the like selling stuff on the dark web, and these dark reveries exist to kind of move past all of that. That's, once again, that's not Glenn's situation. He did it his way for the sole purpose of being able to, you know, because he couldn't go out and get one himself, so he kind of got it through illegal means, which in the end he ends up helping them kind of find out and scrub a lot of the dark reveries from the internet and stuff like that. So that kind of helps out in the long run. So that's kind of how things kind of ended up getting planned out. But it's so interesting. It's also interesting too because Monica, because it's just, well, I'm all over the place. I do apologize. I'm trying to break everything down and just kind of getting sidetracked by stuff in my head. Nevertheless, so all that kind of made her doubt it. They obviously, Charlie and Alexis talked to Mara, but she still has doubts about everything they said. They're talking about like, oh, he was just kind of like, he was unstable before. Even Paul shows her the metrics. It's like, this is the baseline. This is what he was like before. So he was already kind of out there already. And then after Reverie, after 2.0, he kind of got even worse. But it's like, look at me and Alexis. We're the ones that have actually been in there much longer than Oliver. But he kept being like, 2.0 is driving you crazy. But the thing is, it turns out it's because it's like, well, the reason why that happened to you is just kind of like serendipitous for Oliver's point of view. He just took advantage of the situation because it's like you were off your meds for like a week, plus you were feeding into it, so that's why the derealization happened like that. Because he's even to the point, it's like, well, Bryn told me I was here for a reason, and that, you know, even though it's a derealization that maybe like it's still like her consciousness talking to her, trying to help her with her own situation. Something she even talks about this episode. It's easier to do her job because it makes her focus on other people's problems and not really her own. So I thought that was kind of pretty neat. But then it's like, oh man, Alexis is like, she doesn't really believe this. And Charlie's like, yeah, because she knows they're not the truth. You tell her the truth, she'll believe it. So I was like, okay, oh man, there's some dark, serious stuff behind this to a certain extent. Because we learned from Alexis, she talks about it. Like, obviously, she and Oliver were in love. But it turns out Oliver is kind of unstable. Once again, before he was even, like, before the whole Reverie thing, even when they first met, he was unstable. But he had issues that kind of got worse and worse, and he started blaming it on 2.0. Because he even says his line later on, he was like, oh yeah, you know, a guy trying to get the girl he lost. And I was like, oh, is that him referencing Mara? And then I was like, no, it's not. And especially when Mara talks to Alexis, I'm like, Alexis is the guy. I was like, so is he some kind of stalker? To a certain extent, that's what this is all about. He's trying to get access so he can get back to Alexis. Because apparently what ended up driving this whole situation apart was the fact is he tried to burn her house. She tried to burn her house down. So, which is like super sad because for Alexis, that's kind of probably one of the reasons. Because like when it came down to it, maybe that's why she was a little cold towards Glenn, because she's like, oh yeah, Glenn, oh well, I guess, well, when he gets out, we'll just kind of, you know, he'll go to jail. But Mara's like, no, he won't survive in jail. She's like, you reap what you sow. I think that was almost her lashing out because of the whole Oliver situation. She was kind of taking it out on him because it's like, oh, he does terrible things no matter what his reasoning. He shouldn't do, you know, maybe that's just how she is, because it's like, for one, you're taking this technology that I had and you're kind of souring it. Maybe that's kind of how she's also looking at it. But I was like, oh man, that's super cold-hearted of you, isn't it? But like I said, maybe the Oliver situation kind of coming back up kind of made her a little more cold-hearted about it, which understandable. Is like after being through that situation, and it's like she never went public about it because for her, it's like everyone's just looking for an excuse. Investors and all these other people are just looking for an excuse to kind of like discount me. And if they find this out, because in her mind, it makes her feel like she'll like appear weak to people. But it's like, no, because even Mara tries to explain it. It's like, you did nothing wrong. That was 100% on him, but she's keeping it low key. Like obviously Charlie made it kind of go away because that's kind of his thing. Because that's what I was wondering. It's like, okay, what is Charlie so... I guess because that seems to be the thing, because it's something even Monica brought up before, and I've referenced it back then, was like, Charlie, like, she was like, why are you taking such an interest in Mara specifically? Like, he's never taken a direct interest in all the other people, but it's like Mara in particular is because, I guess because he knew what Mara's going through, that maybe that is the reason why he gave her this whole job, not only to help people, but in the long run, end up helping herself. Like I said, there's the whole thing where Charlie's kind of like, oh yeah, if there is something to it, that there is a purpose for her being there, then like, we'll figure it out. Like, he is trying to help her. So, like, part of me is like, like, okay, so Charlie's not the bad guy I was kind of lumping him in to be. Like, obviously he was up to some shady stuff. Like, maybe there's more to it, because obviously for him it is more about perception and stuff like that. But I think at the same time, that's not just him doing it because it's like, oh, I'm part of the company. I think it's also because that's what Alexis wants. She wants everything to be kind of kept low key because she doesn't want it to destroy this technology, which her and Paula, so many people can, have said, like, this is a great technology, which we can see the benefits of it. It ends up helping a lot of people get over their issues, kind of deal with stuff that they're not really willing to do it. The Reverie kind of makes them kind of confront it, and Mara kind of helps them deal with it. So we see the benefit of it, and we know that that's what Alexis wants. She wants to spread it out there so it can help as many people, but these little incidents will set everything back. So maybe there's some issues there they're not willing to see. So maybe there is a little bit true to Oliver's insanity, but at the same time, maybe his whole situation is just because he's got his own issues, and it seems like that's the main thing. So, because it was kind of interesting, because when Charlie confronted Oliver, Oliver was like trying to say stuff to make him mad. He's like, you don't want to make me mad, because you know what happened last time. I'm like, oh, so and now, and knowing what we know about the Alexis situation, it's like he probably beat the crap out of him, because it seems like Charlie is a very protective person, like I said. So I'm starting to look at Charlie in a different. I'm like, oh, is he a bad guy? Is everyone here actually a bad guy? I was like, no, like actually everyone here is a good guy, which is good. I was like, I would kind of suck if she was kind of working for the bad guys, but it's like, no, it seems like legitimately she is. Charlie is trying to do, like I said, I feel like everything he does trying to protect the company is because he's doing it for Alexis, because he's trying to protect her. It's more so her than the company he's trying to protect. I mean, also he's invested in this too, but he wants things to kind of go without a hitch because maybe he sees the benefits of Reverie himself. Maybe it is simply a paycheck situation, but even like him being like, yeah, I got your back, because that's why he wants to keep such good updates, because he wanted to make sure it's like, yeah, there's been no issues, but just on an off chance, I want to make sure that Mara is okay. So maybe there's more to it, but I think it is simply the fact is he does have her back. So for now, I'm gonna believe in Charlie. I still got my doubts here and there, but we'll see about it. But obviously it's so interesting because the security guard is selling he's selling BCIs. He's the one that's kind of selling them on the dark web. So now Oliver's got one. What that means exactly, I don't know. Maybe he's going to, like, he is kind of, like, knows how to operate some of this stuff. So, obviously, he's going to be able to probably push it probably into the more dark Reverie terms rather than just the Reverie itself. And what that means, I mean, what would that mean? How he would actually get access to Alexis? I don't know. I mean, to be fair, like, he knows the insides of the building, so he'll probably know how to, like, kind of do kind of a Glenn situation and break in. Maybe it's just get to Mara so he can get to her. So we'll have to wait and see whether Mara's situation ends up being like, oh, that derealization thing is completely over. Like I said, it's just probably more so like a no, it's her confronting things. Her subconscious telling her like, oh yeah, you need to realize this. Kind of, you're helping all these people, and it's time to take steps to kind of helping yourself. So we'll see in the long run. And then also, like I said, see what Oliver does in the long run. Like I said, this is a great episode just because of that little kind of like, oh man, because like I said, I already had my doubts about them anyway, but now it's like, oh man, wait, is there something? It's like, no, especially when Charlie walked away, he had that malicious smile, and like I said, that final line from him being like, oh, gotta get his girl and everything. But it also seems like they are setting up, Mara being the one to kind of help Alexis, because it's like she tries to pretend like this isn't happening, because she even says like, can we just pretend like this, just pretend like it didn't happen? And then Mara's like, wait, what didn't happen? It's like, Alexis smile. But I think Mara still kind of, she probably sees a lot of herself in Alexis, because it's like, well, Alexis has got this issue that she's not dealing with. It's like, I'm literally the same thing, because it's like probably looking in the mirror. Their circumstances aren't the same, but they kind of dealing, their way of handling their circumstances are the same. So, but I feel like for her, it's like Alexis, I mean, it's kind of sad because Alexis has a lot on her shoulders, obviously, like, she wants this to go without a hitch, and then they're just like, she's got this always looming over. For her, it's just kind of like she can't slip at once. She can't look weak. She has to look completely in control, because for her, it's like, yeah, because if it comes out, it's like, oh my God, I make bad decisions. I was with this person, but it's like, why should that dictate anything? Like, you didn't really know him for who he, like, you didn't know things were going to get that bad. You were in love, and how can anyone fault you for being in love? You saw what happened. You realized the mistake there, and that's the good thing. But for her, I guess it's also kind of a situation of she doesn't want to look at herself like as a victim. It's kind of her way of taking her power back. I think is kind of a way of looking at it. So, like I said, whether she wants to admit it or not, that's still something lingering always in the back of her mind, especially now that Oliver's come back. And I'm curious to see, obviously she's not going to be too keen on Amara trying to help her, but maybe that'll be something we'll see, especially considering Oliver is working in the shadows and see. So they did say that they did find the person who was stealing it. So maybe like the security guard dude framed someone else, or they know exactly what's going on and they're letting him kind of like pull out enough rope to kind of hang himself essentially, so we'll see. The Monica situation took an interesting turn, like bringing her in on it, because it's like, why would we help a guy that's trying to steal, who stole from you? It's like, well, Monica puts up a good case. So luckily Monica was the one that was able to help kind of push things through. So hey, she's not too much of a bad person too. Like I said, you just have a rare, like, I guess because it's like, oh, you feel like this is kind of, well, because it's also going to be like more of a military usage of it, because she works for the DOD, so it's kind of like, I don't know, so we'll see in the long run whether like Monica turns out to be a true ally. I mean, it looks like she's helping, but I mean, obviously, much like everyone else, she's got her own motives, and like I said, I just worry whether or not Charlie's the same way or not. But once again, we will have to wait and see what goes down in the next episode. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and good